Good morning, Newbers. I am here with Kyla, and today we are going to talk about running a board meeting, specifically running a good board meeting. So a good board meeting really starts with a good notice, because you have to have a notice and an agenda before you can hold a board meeting. Depending on how the board meeting operates, you might have a 48-hour notice, you might have a 14-day notice, you might have substantially more than that, depending on what kind of board meeting it is. And well, actually, I guess for board meetings, really 14 on the days or 48 hours. I don't know if it's one more than that. Membership meetings are a little bit different. And this kind of applies to both. You want an agenda to go with your notice, with everything that you're going to vote on. And I think that's an important thing to talk about when we're talking about noticing a board meeting.
Yes.
I have seen agendas with 40 items on them. And generally, that's not something we want to do. It's my belief, and there's probably some artistic license in this, I put things on the agenda that I think need a vote. So if we're going to vote on, for instance, we want to install Christmas lights up at the front. We haven't done it before, we're going to install Christmas lights, and here's a proposal, we're going to do it. That would be on my agenda to vote on.
Yep.
If I wanted to say, I think these are great Christmas lights and give accolades for it, then I would probably not put that on my agenda. Because it's not something we're voting on. Is there a rule on it? What are your thoughts?
So there's no rule. There's no hard and fast rule on it. My thoughts is that generally I would like all of our board members to remember that every unit owner that attends your meeting has the right to speak on every single agenda item. And so if you have an agenda with 40 different items, understand that if they're all controversial, you could end up being there for a very long time. And so when I counsel board members regarding what their agenda and their notice should look like, I tell them to be strategic. You don't have to have all of these items in the board meeting, in the board meeting notice. You can have the only things that you're actually voting on, exactly what you said. And then not all things have to happen in one meeting. You can have a meeting the next day or 2 or 3 days later, especially if you have a lot of things that should be discussed, that should be voted on, and to just save everyone's time and not have you all be there for 3 or 4 hours at a time.
So I've always had this idea, I've never tried it. I'm curious if you've seen anyone who has. Creating agendas that have time certain and ranges. So if we're starting our meeting at 1 o'clock and we're calling it to order, 1 to 1:05, call to order. Approval of the minutes, 1:05 to 1:10. You know, and actually setting times on it, because I have seen meetings that have drug out a bit. I think the perfect spot on a board meeting is an hour. I start to see diminishing returns after an hour. Most of my meetings where we go beyond an hour, if we're discussing anything and we push it to the end of the agenda, nobody really wants to discuss it. And by the time you pass the 2 hour mark, nobody's paying attention.
Exactly.
So the idea of trying to do that always appealed to me, but I've never done it. And I've never seen anyone who has. Do you know if anyone's ever tried this?
I've never seen anyone who has done it. I think that would be fine. But my only concern would be if there was some agenda item that was especially controversial, and there is extended discussion about that'll kind of set off your time and get you off track.
Yeah, I think it comes down to trying to budget the time for that. So if we know we've got, and I guess the idea was in trying to make the agenda, the driver. If we know we have a controversial item, let's build 30 minutes in for it. Let's not throw in 4 controversial items that we know we're gonna have 30 minutes of discussion on each, and then the ones that are at the end, nobody's really paying attention to.
Yeah. And one of the things that I like to counsel associations about is that if you traditionally or continually have board meetings that have some folks that like to talk and drag on a long time, you are allowed to adopt some rules regarding your board meetings. And so one of the rules that I like a lot is to require people to sign up ahead of time if they want to speak on an agenda item. And so then board members, generally when you put something on the agenda, you know what's going to be controversial. But it will help board members and managers to look at a certain item to say, oh, there's only 2 people who want to talk about it, or there's 15 people who want to talk about this agenda item. I like to adopt those rules.
So we get our agenda out We post it, we have it over just the items that we plan to vote on. Now, there are sometimes other items on there that which we might not be voting on that are listed. And I don't know if we should do that or not. For instance, we'll have treasurer's report, president's report, these things that are always there.
Yeah.
There's usually not votes on those though.
No.
Like there's no
It's just
requirement to
here's
adopt.
what's going on.
Correct. So those are just the updates from the officer updates, and then usually we'll list underneath business or old business. We get into our board meeting, and we're moving through. Robert's rules say that you should have a motion and a second in order to discuss any item that is on the agenda.
That's right.
Correct?
That's correct.
I'm going to be very honest. Most of my associations don't follow that. Some do. But I'd say it's only maybe 20 or 30% that actually, every time an agenda item comes up, do we say, I make a motion that we approve the contract with trimmers to do Christmas lights this year. You second it, and then we have discussion.
Yeah.
Most of them will read the agenda item off, we have a bunch of discussion, and then there's a motion and a second, and then it will pass or fail.
Yes.
That's just a Robert's Rules thing. I don't think there's any Robert's Rules police that are out there that are going to get on it. But, just as an FYI to our managers, really we should have a motion, a second, and then discussion.
Well, I think the reason for that is because then you don't really have to have a discussion if nobody seconds your motion. And you can move on to the next agenda item. It's for efficiency's sake.
Correct.
So if the board knows that they don't want to even deal with whatever it was, maybe you wanted this agenda item at the beginning when you noticed the meeting. And then as of the board meeting, you're not prepared to have this conversation. So either don't make a motion, or if a board member wants to make a motion, nobody seconds him or her, the motion dies, we move on to the next agenda item. So it's to keep things moving.
Now, who's responsible for putting the items on the agenda? Who gets to select what's on the agenda?
Well, it's basically the board members, and that becomes an issue when we've got board members that are not getting along, or we've got board members that maybe one board member wants something. When I've dealt with that situation in the past, I've always said to my manager and my board members, if there is a board member who wants to have an agenda agenda item on the notice, I recommend putting it on there. Put it on there. This person's going to make a motion to discuss whatever it is at the board meeting, and if nobody else wants to second it, then the motion dies, and then we move on.
So, in many cases, talk about a board meeting being called. Who calls a board meeting?
Well, in that situation, you should look at your bylaws. Generally your bylaws will give you guidance to that. And it's usually the president or a majority of the board members will call a board meeting.
So the president or the majority can call the board meeting. Any of the board members can submit agenda items that they would like on the agenda. And then when we get to the meeting, there should be a motion and a second to discuss any agenda or to execute anything that's
Right,
on
to even
the
start the
agenda.
discussion, there has to be a motion and a second.
And that's if we're strictly following Robert's rules. Again, I would say only maybe 20 or 30% of my associations strictly follow Robert's rules.
Yeah.
I think what happens is we're all in communities, it's all neighbors, and so things are a little more relaxed, and we go through the agenda in a more friendly fashion. So when we are going through and we're taking minutes off of what we're doing in the meeting, what should be going into minutes?
Well, my favorite joke about these minutes are they're called minutes, not hours. I don't love it when I see pages and pages and pages of minutes of one meeting. When it comes to an agenda item that's discussed, I'd like to see written down what was the motion, who made the motion, written down who made the second, so which director made the second. I don't need to see who discussed what. It's discussion, and I think the issue is that if you're going to start drafting who discussed what if you miss something? And so now you're taking more risk on yourself than you really need to. So I need to see who made the motion, what was the motion, who made the second, and how did each director vote, including who abstained.
And for someone to abstain though, you can't just abstain because you feel like it, right? Or can you?
Although we see it all the time.
We do.
We see it a lot of the time. Generally, no, you shouldn't be abstaining. You shouldn't abstain because your neighbor doesn't like whatever is on the agenda item and want you to vote no. Well, if you want to vote no, you vote no. Abstentions usually come up if you have a conflict, or if you have some situation where you cannot vote in some way, not because you don't like what's on the floor. If you don't like what's on the floor, you vote no. If you like what's on the floor, you vote yes. If you have a conflict situation, you vote, or you don't vote.
You don't vote, abstain.
You abstain, yes.
And if Kate, you have a conflict,
Yes.
you know, I can't vote on this landscape contract, I own the landscape.
Right, or you can't, it is not, this issue is involving my next door neighbor, we're friends, I'm not voting.
Correct.
Although we see that quite a lot.
We do, and as a manager, I don't have a way to compel a person to vote.
No, we don't.
You know, we just, as managers, we record what occurred at the meeting, and that's all that we do. If we're acting on behalf of the association, taking minutes. Oftentimes, the secretary is taking minutes anyway, and they're providing that to the association as part of their responsibilities, which are usually outlined in the bylaws. All right, well, I think we have a general idea of how to run a board meeting. Takeaways from this: good board meeting starts with a good agenda. Board meetings try to target, you know, an hour, not too much longer than that, because we tend to lose folks off of it if we need to break things into multiple meetings. Robert's Rules of Order is fantastic. Try to follow it, but again, sometimes we can't follow it exactly. Usually when we get into trying to follow Robert's Rules exactly, it's because something else has happened. We have
There's a conflict situation.
conflict, a disruptive resident, something like that, and we were going to talk about that in our next episode. Thank you guys.